Hello, boys and girls, and welcome to another Art with Miss Taub. Let's quickly go over what we learned about last week, the difference between a shape and a form. A shape is flat, and a form is fat, or 3D, or you can even say it's more realistic. If you were to draw straight lines on your pumpkin, your shaped pumpkin, it won't look realistic. But the form version has curved lines, and that makes your object or your pumpkin look round. Straight lines keep things looking flat, and curved lines make objects look round or fat or 3D. You could also say that this pumpkin is popping out at you. There's lots of ways to describe a realistic pumpkin. This week, we're talking about another element of art. Remember, the elements of art are what make up our art. They're like our art ingredients. And this week, our art ingredient is space. Space shows you how far or close things are. We're going to be taking a look at a few different landscapes so that we can realize what makes up a realistic landscape. There are three ways that you can show space in your landscape. The first way is distance. So if you take a look at this photograph, objects at the top of the picture are going to be what's farthest away. So what do you think is the furthest away in this picture? If you said the sky or the mountains, you would be right because they are closer to the top of the picture. As you go down your picture, things will become closer and closer and closer. So, the edge of this dock, if we were there, if we, the viewer, right, because we're looking at this picture, if we were there taking the photograph, if we took one step, where would we be? Right here at the bottom of the picture. But we could also go to the edge of this dock. So, it's further away, but it's not as far as the mountains, right? So that's why it's in the middle of the page. Another way to show space is by the size of your objects. So objects near the top of the page where they're far are going to be smaller. And objects at the bottom of the page will get bigger and bigger and bigger. I wonder why Miss Taub had us draw different sized pumpkins. So you can see in this photograph that the flowers in the back, those are the ones that are far away. And as you get closer and closer to the bottom of the page, the flowers get bigger and bigger and bigger. The last way that you can show space is something called overlapping. Overlapping is when some objects get covered up by other objects. The object that is on top is going to be the closest, while the object far away is going to be covered by other objects. So take a look at this landscape. The bottom part, the bottom mountain, the darkest mountain is what is closest. We can see the entire mountain, right? But the one behind it, we're missing parts of this mountain, so it's further away. And even farther is this mountain and this mountain. And these mountains back here are so far that they're even covered up by some clouds. So you know that those ones are super far away. There are three very important things that your landscape must have in order for it to look realistic. Three important things. The first one is called the background, the objects that are in the back of the artwork. If I were to ask you about this picture, what is in the background? If you said the sky or the fence, you would be right, and especially the moon. The moon's all the way at the tippy top of the page, so you know it's far away. If you also said that teeny tiny pumpkin, you would be right because it is the smallest, so we can say that that pumpkin is in the background. The next important thing you must have is a middle ground. The middle-sized pumpkins are going to be what is in your middle ground, like those ones. These are the pumpkins I decided to overlap. And the last thing you must have in your artwork for it to look realistic is called the foreground. Foreground starts with the letter F. So the foreground is at the front. Front also starts with the letter F. That's a good way to remember that the foreground is in the front. And that's where you're going to have your biggest objects. So the pumpkins I drew are so big that I had to actually crop them off the page. That means I wasn't able to fit them all, and you have to use your imagination for the rest of them. Those are going to be your biggest pumpkins in the foreground. I'm going to ask that you show me a background, a middle ground, and a foreground in your landscape by using distance and size. You may also use overlapping as a choice, but you do not have to. Let's get started on creating these amazing pumpkin landscapes.
Make sure you have your types of line worksheet and hold your paper horizontally so that we can fit as many pumpkins as possible. Before I start with my zigzag line, I like to mark my page with 3 fingers down so that I can actually create a nice horizontal line with medium-sized zigzags. You want to take your time because if you have too many super fast zigzags, it won't look right. Next, I measure 3 fingers again to create a straight horizontal line that goes all the way across my page. Next, you want to use a vertical line on the down arrows of your zigzag to connect it to the horizontal line and make the different parts of your fence. Now it's time to add our pumpkins. Let's start with our foreground, what's at the front. This pumpkin is so big that I had to crop him off the page and use your imagination for the rest of him. Remember, there's a couple different ways to draw pumpkins, but as long as you have those curved lines to show the form, that is what I'm looking for. Now it's time to go to the middle ground. Middle ground will have our medium-sized pumpkins. And I'm actually going to show another pumpkin behind that first one to show that it is overlapped or closer. But remember, you do not have to do this step if you do not want to. Remember, as your pumpkins go further up the page, they should be getting smaller and smaller because they are in the background. I'm going to fill up my background with lots of teeny tiny pumpkins of many different shapes. I'm even going to put a really small pumpkin on the horizontal line of my fence because it is overlapping my fence, but it is still super small because it is in the background. I'm even going to add one more overlapped pumpkin over here. Once you have your pumpkins in your pumpkin landscape, you can add details however you want. Maybe you want a moon in the corner or a sunshine in the shape of a circle. Maybe you want to have a loop-de-doop-de line that connects all your pumpkins together for the vine. I'm even going to add a little bug on some of my vines, so just a little extra detail. Maybe you learned how to draw a scarecrow last week, so maybe you want to put a scarecrow in your landscape. All of those awesome details are up to you because you're the artist. I'm going to start tracing all of my lines with a black crayon. The reason I'm doing this is because I plan on using paint and I do not want any of my pencil lines to get lost. You may want to use a permanent marker instead of a crayon, but that's up to you because you are the artist. I want to show you that inside your second grade sketchbook, there are a bunch of sections about landscapes. There's a part about overlapping, cropping, foreground, middle ground, background, and then this little section says, objects that are closer will appear bigger and brighter in color, while objects that are further away will be duller in color and smaller. So you can see when I start to paint my pumpkins, as they get bigger, I'm also going to make the paint brighter. This extra step really shows that you understand what creates a realistic landscape. Now, I started painting my grass second. I wish I had done my grass first because after I painted the grass, my paper was too wet to color in the stems of my pumpkins. So that's just something to keep in mind if you are using paint. Please be sure to have different size pumpkins to show foreground, middle ground, and background in your fabulous pumpkin landscape. I cannot wait to see how you show space in your artwork. Have fun!